So America's dumbest person, the alleged President Donald Trump, bailed out Argentina with $20 billion. But now the America First president is contemplating doubling that to $40 billion. So tell me again how this president is America First. No money for the American people, but $40 billion for Argentina. Yeah, that's what your president's doing, MAGA. Like, share, follow for more. This is Grim with Get the Rant, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Trump is giving another $20 billion to Argentina. We've now given them $40 billion in the last week. How much has gone to American farmers? Zero. Trump also wasn't going to pay the military. They said they weren't paying the military during the shutdown. Oh well, military always gets paid during the shutdown, not under Donald Trump. He said no. Why? This was my favorite. A couple days ago, the Treasury Secretary, when announcing the additional $20 billion for Argentina, said, oh, we can't pay the military because of the shutdown. We're not allowed to. Oh, you're not allowed to pay the military during the shutdown, but you're allowed to pay Argentina. That's nice. Now, here's another point, too. $40 freaking billion. You know how much money they saved by shutting down AID, our foreign aid program that ended up killing lots of children in Africa? $14 to $16 billion they saved. We just pissed it away. $40 billion they gave to Argentina. These guys don't care about money. They are so fiscally reckless. They shut down these programs because they wanted to hurt people. They shut down these programs because they thought it was Democrats, like only Democrats care about helping people. That's why they cut money from Medicaid. That's why they cut money from the ACA. They're not letting us renew the subsidies for your health insurance. The prices are going to double because of Republicans. And now we've got this.
I just had a brilliant idea. Instead of all y'all folks spending all your time trash talking me and telling me how horrible of a person I am and all the rest of the farmers are, why don't y'all spend a little time, call your congressmen and your representatives and all that, try to get them folks up there in Washington to open it back up. Open the government back up and get us some kind of trade plan going on so we can get a good market for all of our commodities. We don't want you dadgum bailouts and socialist stuff. We don't want all that crap because that's going to go straight to the dadgum chemical and fertilizer dealers and fuel dealers anyway. We just want a good trade deal to where somebody will buy our commodities. That's all we ask for. Instead of spending all your time trash talking to me, holler at the people that really can make a difference.
Nah, fuck them farmers. Like I've said before, you're not going to tell me after you voted the way you voted to then call my congressmen and women and my representatives to try to dig us out of a hole that you buried us in. All these farmers, I guarantee it, 4-1 decided to vote for Donald Trump, even though he absolutely crushed you the first time. And now your soybeans aren't worth a warm pitcher of piss. You guys are struggling so much as crop prices are falling as nobody wants your shit because of all of the tariffs and everything else that he is doing to cripple this economy. And your solution after you sold us out, after you screwed us over is, oh, why don't you call somebody? Why don't you call your representative? For God's sake, I don't know what else you want us to do. You continue to vote against your own best interest, and then you whine and complaining when everybody's on your case, on your back, and you say, well, why don't you do something about it? We did. We tried. And now you are where you are because of how you voted. 3 straight times, I guarantee, you voted for that man and he has screwed you over so many times that he is going to bury you and you are going to lose your family farms. So fuck around and find out, FAFO to the nth degree.
American soybean farmers are not happy. Patriots check in, this Secret Service Sam. President DJT is sending not 20 billion, I believe, but now 40 billion dollars to Argentina. But there is a catch. He said there was no catch. He's just doing it, to just bail them out instead of bailing out us and our farmers. We just love to send money overseas, don't we? Why my money? I don't want to send my money overseas. I'd like to fix things here in my city, in my state. But anyway, I'm digressulating. The soybean farmers are not happy because they want trade, not aid. You get what I mean? I like that little rhyme they came up with. But then it's so funny because DJT says, unless Malay wins, the far right president, if the far left president wins, they don't get the money. So he said in one interview, no, he wouldn't, there's no stipulation. And then in the other interview, he said, no, the president he likes has to win. I don't know. Patriots, do the research for yourself. This is your world. I'm just spinning it Tune in today, 2 p.m. on YouTube at Samson's World. We'll talk all about it. Secret Service Sam out. Samson for president of TikTok.
This just in, the Trump administration is now working on doubling its bailout for Argentina and is working to provide the failing country with $40 billion instead of the original $20 billion. The Trump regime is trying to rush aid to Argentina as its economy collapses before the country's election, in part to try to help keep Trump ally Javier Milei in power. Besson said that the U.S. government has ramped up its purchases of Argentinian pesos as well to try to bolster the collapsing currency. It should be noted that Besson's close friends at firms like BlackRock, Fidelity, and PIMCO are heavily invested in Argentina, as is Elon Musk. So this is Besson trying to save him and his cronies from losing money. All this at a time when Republicans are refusing to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies and are laying off federal workers. We're going to keep following all the news, so follow along and listen to the Midas Touch podcast for more.
Hey everyone, well I am here with Angie Craig, who is the ranking member, meaning the highest ranking Democrat of the Agriculture Committee, and she just shared some breaking news with the caucus. So ranking member Craig, what is going on?
Well, it looks like the Trump administration has upped its taxpayer bailout of Argentina to $40 billion. At a time when economic assistance is needed to American family farmers. This is one of the most egregious acts of this administration.
And the corruption abounds. In fact, what you just told me was that the President of the United States is going to send $40 billion of American taxpayer dollars to Argentina to bail them out of their own manufactured economic crisis because their own leader, who is a lot like Trump, frankly, and his buddy, basically bankrupted the country of Argentina. But this is the thing that gets me. He's up for re-election right now, and Donald Trump basically said this aid package is...
Well, this is actually a bribe for Donald Trump to try to get the Argentinian people to re-elect this dictator. It's just the most corrupt, inappropriate use of presidential power, and at the expense of American taxpayers and family farmers in this country. As I said, it's one of the most egregious acts of this administration.
So basically, Trump is conditioning this aid, which is your taxpayer dollars, on this crazy guy winning re-election. So it's a bribe to the Argentinian people. But in addition to that, we're here fighting to save your health care, to keep WIC funded, and to make sure that people can put food on the table. And you also shared with us another shocking revelation, which is that the Trump administration is telling states to not distribute SNAP money, which is food benefits, to folks who qualify next month. Tell us more about that.
Well, the SNAP benefits will go out in October. That is already in the pipeline, but USDA has issued a memo to states instructing them that if the government is shut down after November 1st, not to distribute SNAP at a time when grocery prices are sky high and people are already having to choose whether to pay the rent or feed their families. Again, it is a direct attack on working families in our country.
And in my personal opinion, it's immoral. I mean, the fact that the president would give $40 billion in taxpayer-funded bailouts to essentially an autocrat in another country and then allow families to starve is immoral. It's wrong.
Look, and I don't know how the hell this constitutes America first. So I would say to family farmers, we understand your pain. We're fighting for you. Working families, we understand your pain. We're fighting for you, and I'm going to fight with all of my might against the bailout of a foreign country while Americans are having to forego their groceries.
And you better bet that we're going to conduct oversight and fight back.
Right now, millions of Americans, including the troops who defend this country, are being held hostage. Not by a foreign enemy, but by Republicans in Congress who shut down the government because they refuse to back off their cuts to healthcare. I'm Chris Goldsmith, an Army veteran who's spent more than a decade working on federal policy for troops, veterans, and our families. And I want to talk about what this shutdown means for people who serve and the families who support us. Here's what's really going on. Democrats tried to negotiate a simple deal, cancel cuts to Medicaid, and keep the Affordable Care Act tax credits in place so that millions of Americans don't lose access to healthcare. But Republicans walked away, and now they've shut down the government to push through those cuts. And who's paying the price? The people who serve this country. Starting October 15th, 1.3 million active duty service members are set to have their pay halted. And the Pentagon warned that more than 2 million troops, including the members of the Reserves and National Guard, could miss their paychecks during the upcoming holidays. That means that troops, whether they're deployed to Chicago or Portland or overseas in a combat zone, they're still required to report for duty, but they might not get paid for it. Democrats are pushing legislation that would ensure that troops get paid even with the government shutdown. But Speaker Mike Johnson and Republican leaders in Congress are blocking that bill. Military families are feeling it too. Base child care centers may cut hours or close. Programs like WIC, which help low-income moms and kids buy groceries, can shut down immediately. And if this drags on, funding could completely lapse by October 31st. At the VA, critical programs are paused right now. That means that while veterans like me can still get medical care, things like career counseling, transition assistance, and regional offices that help veterans navigate benefits, they're closed. If veterans are having problems with their GI Bill, problems that are entirely avoidable, caused by Republican political decisions rather than necessity, this could destroy a semester's worth of work that they've already completed and leave them with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Even a short shutdown can cause chaos for families living paycheck to paycheck, making it harder to afford things like rent, groceries, and medical bills. This isn't fiscal responsibility, it's political hostage taking. No one who's served this country should have to worry about putting food on the table because Republicans in Congress want to score points on cable news. The bottom line, government shutdowns hurt veterans, troops, and our families. The very people who sacrifice the most when Republicans fail to do their jobs.
Oh boy. Well, today the Supreme Court heard arguments as to if the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is actually racist to non-black voters. And the 6 conservative judges, including Clarence Thomas, seem to agree that yes, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 has, quote, outlived its usefulness. And Brett Kavanaugh even went so far as to say that any laws that have to do with trying to make equality work need to have time limits, and that the time limit for the Voting Rights Act may well be up. Since 2013, there have been several Supreme Court rulings that have diminished the original power of the 1965 law, starting with Shelby County versus Holder, which said that it was unconstitutional for the federal government to have to approve states' voting laws. So that meant that the states could come up with whatever kind of voting laws that they wanted, and there wasn't a check on that from the federal government. Within hours of that opinion, certain states started making voting more restrictive, adding things like voter ID requirements and changing the times that you can vote to be less convenient. In 2021, there was a case called Brnovich versus the DNC, and the Supreme Court opinion on that made it very difficult for a plaintiff to win a lawsuit challenging voter restrictions if they claimed that the voter restrictions were racially discriminatory. And the case they're hearing right now is Louisiana versus Callias, and if the Supreme Court sides with the state of Louisiana, it would mean that states can draw maps that diminish the voting power of Black Americans. And it looks like they are going to side with the state of Louisiana, which would mean that they could draw racially discriminatory maps. Worst case scenario here is that Republicans can pick up 20 to 30 new congressional seats with newly drawn, more discriminatory maps. That's where we are.
So surely by now you've heard Trump repeat a few times, we'll have to wait and see, in reference to the peace deal or the ceasefire. Now, you remember he said they get about 3 to 4 days to make a decision. And you might be wondering what they're going to have to wait and see on, or what the decision was really all about. This goes back to the Abraham Accords. Now, if you weren't able to watch it or available, I did watch the meeting in Manchester this morning and I took notes. So let's dive in. So let's recap for a moment. The Palestinians have always been against the schemes for a free trade route, which is what the Great Trust is. It's creating that trade route. Now, this would be very, very beneficial to places like Morocco, Jordan, Bahrain, Qatar, the UK, France, Germany, and Canada. Now think about where all these tariffs are being placed. This is almost like the epitome of the Hegel's principle. How can you possibly come up with a solution that everyone's agreeable to unless you create a problem and enhance it that touches on it emotionally, financially, and psychologically? Well, they've done that to a T. Back during the Iranian-Saudi conflict, Khashoggi, he was a journalist, an Iranian journalist who wrote for what you might consider the Saudi progressives. Now, when he started digging into why they wanted the Abraham Accords, he went to Ali Abdullah, who, after seeing encrypted text messages and other messages between Morocco, Russia, and the UAE and Jordan, he was 2 days later. Now, he was highly against this for a reason. He knew what this meant. This meant doing away with certain players in the game, we'll just have to call them that, if they were to step in the way and not agree to this. Now, you can't have this Abraham Accord unless you have a two-state solution, and I'll tell you why. Because this requires public and private funding. So the Abraham Accord, just in case you're forgetting, let me refresh your memory on this one. It is a series of agreements brokered by the US and other Arab nations, like the ones I've already mentioned, including the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. Ding, ding, ding. Now, their areas of cooperation would be highly focused in trade, tourism, and security. Now, this kind of goes back to the videos I was doing about Trump's visits to those Arab nations, in which he visited, before I get this wrong, do you remember I told you earlier that he visited Saudi Arabia on May 13th and not just discussed but signed something called the Economic Partnership Agreement, and it covers energy, mining, and defense sectors, aka security. And then he went to the UAE on the 15th and said, well, we also need industry, science, commerce, advanced technology, and investments for realty. Now, just what was it, like a month ago, he had dinner in the UK, and the guests that were also on that list, aside from Trump and his wife, involved the CEO of OpenAI, being Sam Altman, the CEO of Blackstone, the CEO of ARM, the CEO of Apple, the CEO of Barclays, the CEO of NVIDIA, the Fox chairman, Rupert Murdoch, who is also a right-wing you-know-what, the CEO of Microsoft, and the CEO of Salesforce. Now, currently, Gaza is valued at $0. Their target number is $324 billion. Now, when the minister was being questioned this morning at Manchester, I appreciated that he instantly had an answer for everything. Everything was really solid until one person got up and said, will there be justice served, excuse me, I can't talk today, for the previous crimes that have happened up until this point, including the man-made famine and genocide. Now, while he kind of had the more American answer, which was bouncing around the subject and not directly answering, a few more people got up and said, no, we really want your concrete ideas. We want some sort of, certification that this is going to happen. What steps are you taking to ensure that justice will be served? Because he kind of just kept mentioning, yeah, justice is a good thing. And here's what he said. I cannot promise safety if they don't agree. And he is referring to the two-state solution. Then went on to say, but let's keep focus on rebuilding and forming the committee. Meaning, quit thinking about what's already happened. Let's just move forward with or without their agreement. Now, Tony Blair will not condemn the plan for the Great Trust. And he says we must move forward. Now, if you remember a couple of months ago, the Israeli finance minister came out and said, verbatim here, that the demolition phase had been completed and it was time to sit down and sort of decide how they're going to divvy up these profits. Well, that's interesting because the minister in Manchester this morning said that the board will decide, not the diplomats. However, the diplomats are supposed to be taking over the Abraham Accord. Now, there's been leaked documents that the end state for Gaza is self-governance per the Abraham Accords. And with the two-state agreement would bypass traditional mechanisms for establishing a Palestinian state. So I tried telling you a while ago, this was all linked to the Great Trust, rebuilding it, sort of like they had to rebuild Dubai, but their plans are very similar as in Dubai. They want to build these big, beautiful buildings, put in a bunch of palm trees, since they already destroyed the palm trees that they had, and really just make it a center for logistics, serving IMEC. That would be IMEC. Now, if you want to debate me on any of this, I'd be happy to hear you out, but it's in our faces, and Manchester really proved that this morning.
Most people have never heard of the Hatch Act. It's not something that comes up in conversation, and it's rarely taught in schools. But it's one of the few laws that has helped keep politics out of public service for more than 80 years. It was passed in 1939, the same year that Hitler invaded Poland. The world was sliding into another world war, and propaganda was everywhere. Governments were rewriting truth, turning citizens into followers. Here at home in the United States, Congress decided to draw a line before it was too late. The Hatch Act was written to keep politics out of public service, to make sure the people who work for the government serve the country, not a party. It's a simple idea. No one in public office can use their job, their title, or taxpayer money to promote or attack a political party. It's what keeps the federal government from turning into a campaign machine. And right now, that protection is being flat out ignored. At airports across the country, there's a video featuring Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and it's playing at TSA checkpoints everywhere. She stands in front of the official DHS seal, identifies herself by title, and blames Democrats for the government shutdown. That's being shown on government property through federal systems, while thousands of public workers are either furloughed or working without pay. That isn't communication, it's campaigning being funded by you and me. This isn't happening in isolation. Other agencies have been pulled into the same pattern. The Department of Education changed employees' out-of-office messages to include partisan language about the shutdown. HUD and the USDA added statements to their websites pointing fingers at Democrats. Those are taxpayer-funded platforms, not political billboards. Each of these actions chips away at the line the Hatch Act was meant to hold. They turn public information into partisan messaging. They tell Americans that their own government has taken sides. When the law was written, the fear wasn't about one party or another. It was about what happens when the government itself becomes political. The authors of the Hatch Act had watched democracies collapse under leaders who used state power to enforce loyalty. They wanted to make sure that could never happen here. It's a little too late for that, I guess, but that's why this matters. Not because it's an obscure rule, but because it's a measure of whether government still works for the public at all. When the people in charge can use official platforms to attack opponents, the idea of a neutral government pretty much is gone. It disappears into thin air. And it's not just the messaging. The office responsible for enforcing the Hatch Act, the Office of Special Counsel, is closed right now because of the same shutdown this administration has created. The watchdog has been taken off the field. They know it, and they're taking advantage of it. Some people in this environment, of course, will dismiss this as politics as usual, but that completely misses the point. This isn't about partisan bickering. It's about whether the law still restrains power. The Hatch Act was written so that a teacher, a park ranger, or a TSA agent could do their job without being turned into a political weapon. It's what protects the people who serve the public from being forced to serve a party. I'm not taking any loyalty oaths to a party. When that protection fails, trust goes with it, and once trust is gone, well, we know how that goes. Doesn't exactly come back easily. So yes, Kristi Noem's video is a violation of the law, but it's also a signal of something larger. that the government no longer feels obligated to even pretend to be neutral. That's why understanding this law and its history matters, because it shows us where we are. The Hatch Act was created to protect the idea of honest government. I know it sounds like a joke, but that was the goal, and the idea is beyond being tested. The only real check left is public awareness. People who know the difference between service and propaganda and refuse to confuse the two. That's why I keep doing this work, to make the history clear, to show what these moments mean, and to remind people that laws like this don't protect themselves. People do. If you want to help me keep teaching these stories with context, honesty, and no spin, you can share this post, subscribe on Substack, or tip through the link in my bio. That support keeps this work going when the truth is being rewritten in real time.